Okay.
and I'm gonna make you host.
Very good. I'll take the recording off when I'm done. Yeah.
All right. Yep. You guys have a good lesson.
You. Thank you.
All right.
See you later.
See you later.
Okay. Good evening, guys. Today is December 1st, and this is LNM 3, and this is the evening section at 7 o'clock. We get started a little bit late. I'm sorry about that, because the way we've set up the classes, since we're co-teaching, one of us is host, and since Professor Carlos set up the classes, he's then the host, and then he can hand it over to me, but he has to, in fact, start the meeting. I can't do that by myself, the way that we're set up. Anyway, we're off to a good start now. So welcome back. This week and the next week will just be sort of drills for the final exam, which is going to be on the 15th and 16th of December, because that leaves us a few days after the final exam to sort of clean up a few things if we need to do that. Usually, you know, we have a few things that we can do, you know, to get everyone to the finish line. So I'm going to go through today what you need to know for the final exam, and that's probably going to be the same next week. We're simply just going to drill until we are at the finish line. We're very close, and so there's going to be 3 items on the final exam. There's going to be a fill in the inner voices kind of thing. And there's going to be a full write of a complete expression. And I'm going to go through the difference between the two of them because they're very closely related. And then there's going to be some, you know, spot the error kind of thing, which is with relying on analysis. The thing about analysis is that it's a good skill to have. We have a course, a separate course called Form and Analysis. Where when I teach it, I usually reserve all these sort of analytical skills to that class so that I don't bother too much with that in regular theory. What I emphasize here is the ability to make arrangements. So basically, these are arranging skills, sort of disguised as studies in voice leading and in harmonization. What we're doing right now is that we're harmonizing bass lines, which is a lot easier than harmonizing melodic lines. So if you're harmonizing a melody, which is typically the top voice in today's music, you will have to sort of be able to hear different things and how they relate to a top part, you know, typically a soprano melody. But if you're harmonizing from a bass melody, what we also call figured bass, so figures are numbers, right? So numbered bass, you basically have, instead of a soprano line, you have a bass line, and you apply chords. And the flexibility of being able to add a soprano line that fits into the harmonic pattern that we're looking for is a good deal easier than doing it the other way around, where you have a top line and then you're harmonizing down. So that's what we're doing right now. Sometime in Theory 4 or LNM 4 and 5, we will be dealing with skills that are a little more advanced. But these are really good exercises. They are solid exercises in studying voice leading, meaning the connections between different chords, to connect them in such a way that you can actually sing them without too much trouble. Even if you're not a great sight reader, there are certain ways of writing that will make it very facile to actually read these parts. So this is a great job. These are great jobs to have when you're arranging things. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples and show you what the bare minimum is. The bare minimum will be that I provide the bass line and the top line, so the bass and the soprano, and you're filling in the inner voices. You still have to know what chord you're dealing with. So chord spelling is still the primary skill that we're looking for. And filling in the inner voices is pretty easy because it's either going to go completely wrong and you'll know right away because you'll see that nothing is really lining up, in which case switching the inner voices, I mean flipping them around, is usually the cure for it. But let me show you a couple of things that I've noticed in the homework that I've seen so far. What to do and what not to do. So let me, because if you're reviewing on YouTube, as soon as we have the lessons uploaded, I will give you different keys. So you have, several different keys of working with. I think this morning, gosh, I can't remember what key I was in. I'm probably in A minor, I think. So let me do one in F major. That's a sufficiently different key. And it still works out, so we don't need a lot of ledger lines and all that. So I'm going to write out my usual progression. And this is going to be what you're going to be dealing with at the in the final exam and entrance to grad school. It's going to be something very similar to this. So I'm going to do this little voice exchange, as you now have seen quite a few times, where we're taking the F from the first note, and that becomes the last note. And then the A here becomes the first note. So we're sort of doing this voice exchange, as you recall. The whole study of this semester has really been dedicated to studying the predominance, because our chord vocabulary is really exemplified in all the different predominants that we have. This then crawls up to a C, scale of B5, repeated, and then we're back to 1 again. And if we're doing this pattern here, the same pattern as before, 3, 2, and 1, then it's fairly easy to see what our tagline for the predominant is going to be. That I'm going to fill in, obviously, this space between the F here and the A here. That would be a G, so scale degree 2. And this is what I saw in some of the homeworks that I received, that even if I write in scale degree 2, some people just conveniently ignore that and say, okay, I'm going to write in my predominant. Let's say you have a, I don't know, a 2-6-5 chord. Some of you guys for drilling this and giving me a whole bunch of examples of 2-6-5 chords and 2 half-diminished 6-5 chords, and spelling them out in the following way, which is fine, but it is just not going to connect very well. If you say to yourself, okay, in the key of F, at 2-6-5 chord, we're in the key of F, because, oops, you can see that we're starting on F and we're ending on F. The ending is the more important aspect of it. So while tonal music may not always start in the tonic, although very often it does, here's your tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic. You can be absolutely sure that at this level, any tonal music is going to end in the tonic. So your best bet is to go to the end and see the bass note. This is going to end in a root position tonic triad. That's the way this works. So a lot of you sort of said, okay, this one here is a 2 chord, which is a G minor triad. And you're sort of spelling that out and saying G minor third up, major third up, and then a 7th, like this. And then you neatly stacked up, say here, B flat, there's going to be a D in it, there's going to be an F, and there's going to be a G. I mean, this connects like nothing. And it is, hold on. Okay. Now I can't actually admit people other than touching the screen. That's a little inconvenient because I'm lecturing. So if you're late, then you're going to enter the waiting room. But since I'm not the host, I have to let you. This you can see, if you're a soprano and then you have to sing down from the F here to the G down here, and then up again to the A, that's obviously completely hokum writing. This is just basic theory sort of chord spelling. And so I said this a million times, I'm going to say it again, don't stack from the bottom. Do not stack from the bottom because you're not going to be able to connect all these different limbs. If you look at SATB texture, SATB, sorry, my board is wobbling here. It's almost like a body with two limbs on top and two limbs at the bottom, right? It's like the human body. You can see that the legs here are not going to connect if you're just stacking up from whatever lowest note you have and then stacking them up. That sort of goes without saying, but yet I got, and some student, not from this group actually, but from the other one was particularly diligent. I think that student had sent me like 20 examples of different predominants that were all spelled this way from the bottom up. While I appreciate the effort, that this is not what we're doing. We're connecting arms here and legs here, right? And you're not going to be able to connect. I mean, look, if you want to clothe a hand, you're not doing it very well with a shoe. And if you want to clothe your feet, you don't wear gloves on your feet. I mean, it's pretty straightforward that we understand that these are the notes in that chord. And if I were to invert it, then I would have the G on top, like this. Don't try to squeeze them in under each other. Like sometimes I see students still do this, that they sort of try to be nice and Christian or whatever, and they do this. So it looks like a third. This ain't the third, right? It just isn't. These are two notes that have to clash, and we have to see, our eye has to catch that they're actually standing here side by side, these two notes, and clashing, because that's the way it's going to sound. If you have a seventh in a chord, it is a richness to the sound that we will be able to see, like two spices or two, let's say, two colors, right? In a dish. We want them to not blend sometimes. We want them to really stand side by side. So now your job is to connect these things here. And you'll see that, okay, the G also, because the top note really, B flat is in the bass, and the G connects very elegantly this note to this note. It will not connect if it's down here. I think that goes without saying, but you know, I know that some teachers are measuring their student success by the number of hours they spend on a homework assignment. I don't work like that. I don't actually really care how many hours you spend on it. And I can assure you that your audience, if you're a performer, they don't really care if you spend 20 minutes on a piece or 20 years on a piece. They just want to have a good experience. It's as simple as that. That's a little unfair maybe, but it's not that you're not going to submit your resume to an audience from the stage. I mean, you've got to get used to that. It's actually the achievement itself that is the value. So that means that if you get this, and if you can do it like this, then that's a good thing. That means you have more time to spend with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or you know, go out in nature and have some fresh air, whatever, and more time to practice. I mean, you're not going to get rewarded for all the time you spent doing it wrong, because that's really not going to teach you anything much. I hope I make this point clear and we all understand that. So here's the way to write it. Write the bass line first. This is your first order of business. One, right? The bass line, write out the bass line. And then number two, don't just say, oh, you know, in the spirit of democracy, let's go to the next line up. It doesn't work like that. You go to the next most important line. And since we have identified that we're doing sort of harmonized bass lines or figured bass lines, we can now determine, we can actually make our outer voices work really well together. The shape of the line is really important. You can see that this one here, generally speaking, I know that it goes back and forth a little bit because there's some variation here, but basically speaking, it goes from scale degree 3 and then it says 2 and 1. So that's really the overall structure here. If you were to analyze this on a really deep level, you'll see that this is a descending line. It takes a little bit of experience and sort of, a trained eye to see that that's what's happening here. And you can see also that this line here is an ascending line. It goes up, right? Even if I'd ended down here with the same F again, we can see that generally speaking, there's a gradual rising baseline. That's a very normal way that tonal music will behave. But I think you can see that the architecture is such that we have this going on, right? So contrary motion, in terms of the big picture, that's the name of the game. If you aim for that, that's actually something that's easy to develop an eye for. All you have to do is to not get confused and look at too many details. I think a lot of students get very confused with music theory because they're starting with the detail. They're not starting with the big picture. Just like looking at a TV screen, the big picture is actually the easiest thing, because you can see the image, right? And then the harder skill is to understand where all these little dots and squiggles or whatever, where they fit into it and not get lost in the detail. When people have a hard time with music theory, it's because they've been trained to see the detail before they see the big picture. That's what happened to me before I had sort of proper theory training, which happened pretty late in my case. And truth to be told, I wasn't really interested. So therefore, it was difficult because I didn't invest myself. And I know that's the problem for many of our students too in this school, that they don't see the point and therefore they're not investing themselves. And therefore, they have to sort of struggle with this over and over and over again and pay for more instruction in new schools, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't get easier over time. So this is the big picture. Now, if you were, so one of the assignments will be that you have to, just based on these little, let's say, analytical symbols here. That's a very bad aid, but like that. If I give you that I expect you to be able to write a full progression in A key. To fill in the bass line first, and then fill in the soprano line that is fitting, and then fill in the inner voices. So that's the sort of top level, the top flight level that we're looking for. In the other assignment, I'm going to fill in the bass line and the top line, and all you have to do is to do the inner voices. I'm going to write them up in red so you can see how I'm doing that. That's actually quite easy. You just have to know that a 1 chord in the key of F is an F chord, right? If you're an F minor, it's an F minor triad. If you're an F major, it's an F major triad. So you write it up if you want. You can sort of do this and say, okay, an F major triad is that one. I already have the F, I already have the A. So I'm going to place a C, and then I'm also usually doubling just whatever's in the bass, So so this one is gone, right? Or one of them is gone, and the A is gone, the C is gone, and I can try, you can try your way around this. And you can see that if I were to add a C, I can't add it above it because I've done my work, I've put my stem in, that means that nothing goes above the soprano. That means that C is not available. The only available other C would be this one here. And now you can see that there's a huge gap here, right? And now I'm going to place another F, and you can see that, okay, now this is out of whack because my soprano is very low and there's a huge gap here and I can't connect anything. So as I said, flip the inner voices. If you see, as you move forward, for instance, you see that you have to sort of skip up or skip down and all that. You have, generally speaking, some inner lines that are very difficult to read. Very often when you hear people rehearse over and over and over again, it's because the music is badly written. It's simply not written in a way that is easy to read. Now, sometimes that's done for a reason, because some composers are looking for a particular sonic effect. But most often on this level here, it's because people can't write. They just don't know how to do voice leading. So look what happens here. If I flip the inner voices, I take this F and I flip it up here, and I take this C and I flip it down here. All of a sudden, bingo, we have close position, everything works out really well, and I can progress to my next chord. So my next chord is, I have a G in the bass, right? But moreover, I'm analyzing, because to do this, you have to be able to analyze. I know that some of my colleagues, one of my colleagues has criticized me because I'm not spending enough time on analysis. But the truth of the matter is that, in order to write progression like this, you have to be able to analyze the chords. Otherwise, you don't know what you're writing. So I'm calling this part writing because that's what it is, but you have to be able to analyze. But, just to be nice and all that, I'm going to give some exercises in analysis where you don't have to write anything, where the writing has been done, and all you have to do is to analyze and see, am I applying the right label or have I made any mistakes? To sort of spot the error kind of thing. I know that if you're working for the Board of Ed, most of the exams that you're going to be confronted with as a music teacher is exactly that, sort of spot the error. Let's say you get a gig in a high school and you're the band instructor, and let's say you play the saxophone. Obviously, you would know pretty well what that sounds like, and if people are making a mistake on the saxophone, you'll be able to spot it very quickly. But some of the students in these exercises, let's say the bass player has been instructed to play the wrong note, and then you're supposed to be able to hear it. So let's say I give you a written exercise and I claim that I'm going to write this progression, but I've made some mistakes. Let's say I made a parallel octave or I've made the wrong chord or something like that. Then the trick here is to make that as an assignment and you spot the error. That's sort of how that works. This one here, scale degree 7 in the key of F is E, right? So it's an E. Oh, let me do it in red again. Okay, so that's an E. That's scale degree 7, yeah? And you can see it's a diminished triad because of the circle here. So E diminished. Let's do that first. E diminished. So the note E and a minor third up, that's a step and a half. That'll be G. Oh, okay, like that. That's one minor third. And then another minor third up from G would be B flat. This is sort of basic music, right? So we're on par with that. Now I'm going to invert this to first inversion because the 6 here, it doesn't mean that there's a diminished 6 in it. Diminished 6 makes no sense because that's a fifth, and that's just a clumsy way of writing a fifth then. So the 6 means that it's in first inversion. That means I take the root here and I put it up on top. Now I have 7 diminished 6. The 7th scale degree is the root of the chord. It's a diminished triad and it's in first inversion. That's what that means. And we can see that we have the G, we actually have 2 Gs, so the bass is doubled again, very, very common. And in first inversion, you can see that it doesn't really make a difference because the soprano note is the same as the bass note. So the other sort of common rule of thumb is to double the most stable note. I understand that none of these notes are really particularly stable in this key, but out of these 3 notes, the leading tone is highly unstable because it is a half step away from its position, right? I mean, from the root of the tonic. So E is the leading tone and therefore highly unstable. The B flat is also highly unstable because it is a half step away from A, which is part of the tonic triad. You can see that here. That leaves G. G can go up as it does here, and it can go down. So out of those 2, this one here is the most stable tone, And I then place all these notes in the closest proximity to the note from which they came. Okay, I see the B flat, for instance, would be very close to the C. I see that the E, the G, I don't have to worry about because it's already here and it's already double, so we don't have to worry about that. The G is placed. The E, let's see, okay, if I place the E here, right, you can already see that this is not going to work. So don't do that. Be a bit of a chess player, right? But try to anticipate what your opponent would do, rather than just say, oh, you did that, and now I have to react to it, you know? Being able to anticipate what will happen in the future is a really, really important skill. That's one you can learn from here. So if I place the B flat here, you can also see if I place the B flat here, you know, you can see that it doesn't really work very well because there's no connection at all. So let me flip them again and say the E fits in really well here, and the B flat fits in very well here. Just a little note on the B flat, or notes that are, let's say here, for instance, let me write a D. Don't do this, right? And don't write a B flat like this and then have a ledger line on top of it. This is very confusing to the eye, so don't do that. And I know I'm going to get 25 wrong ledger lines back, and that's okay. You know, we'll live with that. There are worse things in the world. This one here, leading tone, goes up, right? And this one, you just fill in the missing note. You have, this one is the same as this one. It's just in first inversion, but we see that that's basically an F major triad. You already have an A, you already have an F. All you have to do is to place a C. Bingo. It goes like that. Okay, so what I'm doing here is that I am filling in the inner voices. That should not be too much of a problem. And this is the bare minimum that you need to do to pass the course. And look, guys, let's say you don't pass the final exam. That doesn't mean necessarily that you will fail the course. I mean, if you got a D, for instance, in your midterm and you flunk out of the final exam, that's not good. I mean, you know, then it's better for you, really, to take the course over and learn your things, learn your onions, because you will need it at some point. But let's say you got a decent midterm result. If you flunk out of the final exam, that may not mean that you're going to fail the course. Depends on a lot of other things. Let's say you've never been to class. That's not a good idea ever. But it happens, right? Okay, this one here. Actually, let me just, so here, I'm going to do the same again. You see, this actually works twice. So you get 2 for 1 here. And this one here, the only difference you can see is that the final station for that line is to say 5, 4, and then 3. And then you'll see that for this kind of progression here, you will have a root, 2 more roots, and a third. So a root in the third is called an 8/3 chord, like that. That's what it's called. It's also called contrapuntal writing. So that's counterpoint writing, meaning that you're following the logic of all the parts as they move from left to right or horizontally. I mean, horizontal considerations are melodic considerations, right? You know, that's how we write melodies, and they usually conjunct. You know, if they skip and jump and all that, they can still be called melodies, but very often they would form what we are calling compound melodies, arpeggios, etc., etc. They have like different structures that are sort of have different allegiances inside of the way they work. Here, very easy. We understand that these are all the notes, and we simply just write down from the top. Here's my F. If you have a common tone, just keep it. That's the easiest way to sing anything. It is that if you just sang a note, and if that note is present in the next chord, keep it. Don't have it leap around because it's not going to sound, I mean, the harmony is going to be the same, right? It's going to be just more difficult to rehearse. You will see people, there are two things that make people rehearse more. A, the music is badly written. 2, they don't know how to rehearse it. It's as simple as that, really. You know, so if you have music that is really well written and you have some person who's good at rehearsing, then it's not going to take much to put music together. That's kind of what everyone wants, really, especially if you're not paid for it. I mean, if you're paid per hour, then, bring it on, right? Because I'm making more money, but that's usually not the way it works, especially not if you have a flat fee sort of salary position in a church, where you're going to call in all your volunteers and all that. If you're going to call them in again and again and again, and they have to hire babysitters and whatnot, then you'll soon have a very reduced choir available in your church. So just learn to write. It's a good idea. Okay. So this one here, I just fill in the missing parts. So basically, the B flat is gone, right? Because it's in the bass. The G is gone, the F is gone, and the D writes itself. Just wait with that tenor until the last voice that you're filling in. Do not try to stack it. I saw that. I saw one, one of the students did this. So, okay, let's say the G was right? But the F was down here and the D was here, right? That's plonk. I mean, that's not going to work. You can clearly see that leaping down from the tenor, and then up again. It's just not good writing. Okay, like that. A little detail. Make them look as if they have the same stem that is sort of extending through this interval of a second, right? That's just nice professional writing, and there you go. So this is the minimum. I give you the bass and the soprano, and you fill in the inner voices. That's going to be a piece of cake. I mean, most of you can do that blindfolded. And those who can't, well, we'll get you there, right? Don't panic. We'll get you there. I'm not really sure that I have anything else to send you with, because now I've sort of done everything. Just remember that. So the third order of business is the alto, like that. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Remember this. First one to go in is the bass, right? The last one to go in is the tenor. Start with the bass, then go to the soprano. Get these two voices to work together. Contrary motion, and then fill in. So that means that whatever goes up, your opposite voice is going in the opposite direction. That's what contrary motion means. Like this, or like this. If your bottom voice goes down, this one goes up. If this one goes up, this one goes down. You see what I mean? This is simply just a golden principle of voice leading. It doesn't really matter if you're Miles Davis and you're playing a solo over some chord changes in the piano or whatever. If your bass line, if you're blowing a solo, then try to listen to your surrounding musicians and try to do something that balances what they're doing. It's just good music making, and it certainly works for doing part writing. I mean, if I take a step back like this and I just look at this, it's pretty advanced in some ways. It's just that we've done it so many times because we've used this little ditty here as a model, and we're still trying to squeeze the life out of it, to learn how chords are connected, and learning how voices are moving in relation to one another. The most important thing to understand is that in terms of the inner voices, make them move as little as possible. All these voices, you can see that there's, I think, is there anything that leaps at all? Well, there's the little 5-1 leap, bum, 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 bum. I mean, we can all do that actually, right? Because we've heard these harmonic progressions that are going from the dominant 7 chord, from the dominant or scaling with 5 in the bass to 1, bum, 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 and we can all replicate that. So that's the only leap, if you think about it. It's the only leap in the entire progression here. Everything else either moves by step or stays put. So you're repeating a note. All right, that's all I have actually. Assignment number 1 is to fill in the inner voices. Assignment number 2, for those who want to stretch out and show that they've studied a little bit more or have better understanding, I will give you a key. I'll give you the functional harmonies here, and you do all the work. I think you're all capable of doing this, actually. But in case you sort of say, I'm going to stay with the discount version, just fill in the inner voices, but do it so that you are in closed position, no open positions. Open positions are invitations to get it wrong. All right, questions? We're good? Okay, I'm getting a lot of thumbs up. That's a good sign. We will, tomorrow when I get into the office, I'm going to send you a homework assignment. Okay, Griff, I'm going to send you a homework assignment. Fill it in, right? And then on Tuesday again, we're going to hammer this one more time and another homework assignment. And then the week following that, we're just going to close it out and say we've done pretty well, because we've covered, I mean, before, I'm very fastidious about this whenever I can. I mean, look, guys, we're working on the really sort of strange conditions in a way. I think this format works really well. I actually really feel that this has been a revelation for me in teaching someone, because I think it gives all of us more freedom. I mean, I don't need to commute 2.5 hours to get to school and then 2.5 hours home. That's an extra day's work. I mean, people don't know, outside of New York or London or whatever, you know, because I worked in London before that, and it's the same thing. People are commuting like 4 or 5 hours a day. That's an extra day's work. People outside of the big cities, they don't understand that at all. They don't understand why we're doing it. Sometimes I don't understand it either. But anyway, my point is that the electronic medium here, and the fact that you can review things on tape, I think is actually a great thing. Good. All right. So I got all the thumbs up. Have a good night, guys. And so as always, I try to get all my ducks in line before Thanksgiving, because I know that once we come back, then there's not a whole lot of time to sort of do any adjustments. So we got it right this time. And this class has been really good. Most people have just done their work steadily and shown up whenever they needed to. Okay, so I'll send you a homework assignment tomorrow, and you let me know what you need. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night.
Welcome. All right, guys. See you later.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Bye.